Hi, everyone. We have today with us Tom Pauken II, who is the author of book US versus China, From Trade War to Reciprocal Deal. Tom is also an Asia-Pacific affairs commentator based in Beijing. He's quite active on Quora and answers a wide range of questions on China. You should go have a look there. He uses the name Tom McGregor while pinning articles for the media. So to start with this discussion, my first question to you will be, as in your book, Tom, you have boldly discarded Mao's China. Instead, you approach the progressive Ding China. It tells the story of China's rise, its economic growth, its journey of becoming a superpower. How do you see Jinping's China, more into Mao's shoes or someone with the approach of Ding's?
Thank you for inviting me. And what's interesting is Xi Jinping has his own type of footprint. So it's neither Maoist nor Ding. It would be Xi, Xi Jinping thought. So it's a little bit of a combination of a strongman leader, along with a lot of reforms and opening up at the same time. But overall, he comes out a much stronger leader than as a reformist at times. But he's also very pragmatic. So there are other times when he supports reform when it's to China's benefit.
To add to this, many of the non-Chinese academic sources are showing the similarities between Mao and Jinping. In fact,
Sure.
President Jinping wearing a Mao suit during 100th celebration of Chinese Communist Party was seen as a big decision to accept presidency on the lines of Mao. So do you
Sure.
think that was
Well, that's a good question to ask for a situation to point out. You have to realize that at that time when he was wearing the so-called Mao suit, this was the 100-year celebration of the CPC. The CPC is the Communist Party of China. Therefore, you're going to have a lot of references of the old days and when the CPC first started. So it was more of an image of Chinese patriotism rather than a case of showing a Maoist strongman leadership. A lot of people, let's face it, a lot of people do not really understand China. I had a discussion with a US-based reporter yesterday, and a lot of times what you see in the US media, also in the Indian media about China, can be quite harsh and very, very negative. And I think what ends up going on is it's basically an interpretation of this Maoism, that China is Maoist and will always be Maoist. And even when I came to China in 2010, when Hu Jintao was president, I was hearing the same exact stories. There's no change other than the fact that Xi Jinping is a much stronger leader than his predecessor.
Oh, all right. So you say that it was more about because of it was the 100th celebration rather than showing.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you don't see him wearing those clothes every day.
Yeah, that's true, though.
It's the same with Putin. When he goes and Putin goes off and he is visiting the military bases in Russia, he is wearing the full combat gear. It's the same thing with a lot of Chinese when there are a lot occasions to celebrate, say, CPC history or the founding of it. They tend to wear the same type of clothes. But it's just, it's like imagery. You see it in America, you see it in India, that sometimes you see this type of imagery used when that's all it really is. It's not a message of hate.
Okay. So to add to this, like you said, that he has his own way. He's coming up with his own strategy, not following anyone's shoes. In your book, you have mentioned American dream versus Chinese dream. With the pandemic and with the President Xi's pledge, a deeper support for what he called Chinese dream, how has China suffered from the pandemic and how this will impact the Chinese dream?
Well, obviously, the pandemic has impacted China as well as India and many other countries. When I had written the book and it was published, I believe, in September 2019, I did not even know coronavirus existed, okay? So I had another reporter ask me the same questions. Tom, how come you talk about coronavirus in your book? I said it was written and published before it happened. So I can see the future, but sometimes I can't always see all the details. What's going on here is with the Chinese dream. It's also this issue of patriotism and supporting one's country, and it's not even. And as you read in the book, there is some sharp differences between the Chinese dream and the American dream. The American dream is more about individual happiness, whereas Chinese dream tends to be more about helping China become the great rejuvenation of an amazing country. So there's just but that's also a cultural issue, is many Chinese by nature think in a communal aspect. When you have democracies, they tend to think more in an individualistic mindset. Because I'm an American, I have a good understanding of both cultures. So when I talk to Chinese and they're like, I don't understand why the Americans talk this way, I can explain to them. But a lot of times I hope to get more word out, because I want to explain Westerners how the Chinese are thinking. It doesn't mean I always agree with everything they say or do, but if you don't understand their mindsets, if you don't understand their culture, then you're going to have major issues with communications. And sometimes you'll have terrible tensions, as you've witnessed between India and China at times.
If I have to add to this, the PEW that recently China had, it says that the current citizens, the current people are like, they have much freedom, or more freedom than their ancestors now in China. So do you think the more Chinese dream coming up, and that's like it's so way, or that shows that people are feeling that they are more secure, they're more financially better than their ancestors? It's a step towards the Chinese dream.
Yeah, and also, and I addressed this also in my book about the fact is the prosperity is wonderful for China, but they always worry about issues of social instability. So they're not so big on protests and violent riots like you see in America. Yes. So they just believe in theirs that you have to have a strong ruling party. So when they say when socialism with Chinese characteristics, this has a very wide and various meaning and definition. So the reforms and opening up were mainly focused on better living conditions for the Chinese, better overall economy. But at the same time, there's going to be always this element of a strong government. And when some people come to me and says, well, when is democracy going to come to China? And I'm like, it's probably not going to happen. But they would say reforms and opening up. Well, the reforms and opening up are mostly about the living conditions of the country, not the political conditions. So it's sort of like China has its boundaries, and no matter what happens, they're always going to stick to their boundaries unless there's some drastic scenario to change that. So I think a lot of times when people criticize China, they're always basing it on the fact that they're accusing China of lying about its reforms and opening up, when in reality, they don't understand what its real meaning is.
I think that makes more sense now, because it's more about the people and their living, and not about overall opening up. That's how they're taking, I think, their ancestral legacy and coming up slow and forward. And they're not slow, definitely, but they're coming up with those reforms, but I think they're very slow in the nature that they're even protecting their old culture or their ancestral things that were embedded in China already. And that is remarkable, though, to keep your legacy going. It is remarkable, definitely, because for any society, I feel that for any society to grow, you have to really keep your legacy there. You need to keep your background with you. Then only you can see a better future. If you don't learn from your background, if you don't learn from them, the future is going to be unstable, because you don't know what you're doing. You're not sure of it.
Well, I also agree with you. When I took my family for a vacation to Singapore, I met a lot of Indians in Singapore, and they maintained their cultural traditions and cultural outfits, and they were very proud of their country and proud of their government. So it's the same with the Chinese and the Indians, and also Trump, when he did this America First idealism, it wasn't this extremist xenophobic nationalism, because it's not just America first, but if your country is China, make China first. If you're India, India first. So it was more about just loving your country first, and then fight for the interest and self-interest there from that format. And so take pride in your cultural history, take pride in your heritage, and take pride in the fact that you are different. You know, and I always admire people who are different. I'm always different. Okay. So
Everyone
when
is.
I meet people who are different, I love it.
If I add to it, my mom, I have been brought up in a joint family. So my mom used to always say that all your fingers are different, but they work together, they stay together,
Yeah.
and they respect each other. Similarly, every person is different in a family. So when you're talking about a
Sure.
different culture or a country, it's totally,
Yeah.
you're talking about a very big, broad perspective already. So when you can't
Exactly.
be, when
And I think a lot of times globalism forgets that, and Americans forget that. They always just assume that everyone has to follow the American way. I've talked to Washington thought leaders a month ago or every once in a while, and they're always going, "Oh, China has to follow the global governance." And then I ask them, "Who's controlling the global governance?" "Well, the Americans are." So how do you expect the Chinese to follow? What about national sovereignty? What about the country having a right to make its own calls and how it runs its country? This idea of global governance, you only like it because it's run by the Americans. What if you're not American? How do you expect somebody to respond?
in fact, for me, when I moved here and I started living here, I came to know a lot more about Chinese culture than when I was in India, definitely. And then
Sure.
after coming here, now I'm celebrating Chinese New Year with my friends. I have lots of them.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and we're decorating my house as I do
Great.
it on a Diwali or a Christmas now. So I
Sure.
think there's something addition to me that I have seen in the culture that I've added to mine, to
Yeah.
my family, and we are taking it forward. So I think when you see the difference and you respect it and you take it forward, it's that when you talk about the change. And
Sure.
when you cannot respect or cannot understand the society as a whole, it's very difficult to talk about the future or the change because you do not understand the base of that society, though.
Yeah.
How are you
And
expecting
also, it's
change?
important for a country to respect their culture. So sometimes when somebody is an outsider and says, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that," it's like, it's my country, not your country, kind of, you know. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, and this is another issue that the Chinese have with a lot of Westerners. I've occasionally acted that way when I first moved to China.
Yeah.
And what you just sort of realize is that if they ask for your opinion, you give it. But if they don't ask, stay quiet.
Going forward, another question that I would like to ask you is,
Sure.
there's a chapter on Made in China 2025 plan,
Ah,
which I
yeah,
found very interesting as it
sure.
speaks about innovation and the vision. This is a very crucial time to address this as Facebook is now Meta. They intend to
Sure.
completely overshadow the global VR, AI, big data, cloud computing sectors. How do you see this plan will be? Can this
It's
plan?
all talk. It's all talk. Americans, I'm an American. We love being big talkers. Uh, the best, the best marketers in the world, the best communicators in the world, I will agree, are we Americans. But sometimes we're a little bit too much talk, too much boasting, and sometimes we need a little bit of humility. So if Facebook is really saying that, they don't realize how foolish they sound by making those remarks, because they literally have to follow through. People are going to expect that. And is that really true that they're going to be number one in all these fields as a company? That's not
I
easy to do. They're going to have lots of
know.
rivals. Exactly. I mean, they're number one maybe in the Facebook side, social media app, but WeChat is actually has more people than Facebook as users, who are actually more active users than Facebook users. I've actually, if you look closely at Tencent Holdings, the operator of WeChat, they are making almost the same amount of money as Facebook is, or even more. I'm writing a book on Shenzhen right now. And next week, I'm going to do some deeper research on Tencent. Okay, so what Facebook is saying to right now, just to me, is just talk. Any company saying, even if Tencent said that, it's not their culture to boast like that, but even if Tencent and here in Shenzhen said the same thing, I would just see it as boasting. I mean, China, when they did their Made in 2025 plan, and I mentioned it in my book, it was a little bit too much boasting. The officials got too eager to show off their Chinese patriotism. Maybe they were worried their bosses were not going to be impressed unless they put the phrases, China's going to be number one. And I just think they overdid it in the hyperbole, and they got caught, because what ended up happening is Trump became president and they said, are you sure you're going to be number one? Well, we're going to fight you on that. So, Facebook, these kind of words to me are just very silly. They should not be boasting like that, because they're going to end up having to deliver. And if they don't, their stock price will crash.
That's true. As you say, it's not a unipolar smart tech sector, though the smart tech sector is moving out of America now. It's no more a unipolar. That's how you see it, isn't it?
Yeah. And India has a very strong tech sector.
Yes, definitely. They do. India has too much of research. They have a lot of big names who are doing research and development for giants around the globe. We're talking about, so it's no more a unipolar smart tech sector.
Exactly. It's no longer US versus China. You have Europe. They have some tech companies. India, Japan will always be in the mix. Japan's culture is very detailed oriented. Many Japanese people I met, I've been so impressed by their detail oriented mindsets.
They are.
That's why they're so successful at the tech industry. You have to be detail oriented. The Indians are very good at Bollywood and being very high energy and very passionate, and the Americans are good at the marketing. The Europeans are very philosophical. The Chinese, if you don't think about the politics, if you look, most Chinese I met, I think their actual strength is as business people, adapting to situations and figuring out how to make a profit from it.
I see more when you talk about India. So for me personally, it's more about how they know how to manufacture. They can find their way throughout it. They can get the thing done. It's more about, it's how they have put it up, I'll say, because I think I have seen the manufacture industry very closely all my life. So I see, and they were great manufacturers before. I think if I go to the history of India before the British rule and all, they were great manufacturers. That's why they were called the Golden Bird. They were producing, they were exporting. And then I think that's what India somewhat lost its place somewhere. They lost it. The people who were
supply chains,
it did lost. But now I see, because I heard one of the IIM's lecturer, who is IIM is one of the best institutions for management in India, and I heard one of the lecturers who was actually telling, we were here, why can't we get this back? And I think the young minds now, the way the India is coming up with startups, I think the young generations have really understand that this is what we are good at. This is what we can do. Let's go. Let's try this out. Let's give our shot to it and see how it goes. So I think if we take that as a future, because after, if we see the future, might be that we see the again old India. Because I know the energy that Indians have. If they get into something, they want to do something right. They are onto it, and they will do it till the end, till it's finished.
Oh yeah.
They won't stop.
I admire the high passion and the high energy of
high energy people. And high passion. So
you guys know how to perform on stage.
So I think once they understand that that's what their legacy was, and that's what they're good at, they can definitely go forward with it. Yeah. So going to this, if I come back to Made in China plan, the international media said is a Chinese version of German Industry 4.0 plan with the Chinese characteristics. It has been in media a lot lately.
I made some reference to that in the book as well, that it looked very similar to the European plan, the US plan. It was just basically copy and paste and just said China #1.
And I am looking forward to more discussions with you as we grow on this aspect, how the relationships are going to go forward, how they're going to grow, and have another perspective from you.